he is a fabulous writer, and I got a lot of feedback from different people after the service last week that, wow, Tom Brown's letter was really terrific. So this morning, when I woke up, I went on Facebook, and there was another essay by Tom Brown. So and it kind of fits what I want to speak about today. So I asked Reverend Jen if she would mind if I did the reading again. So again, this is from Tom. And he writes, in going through my papers, I found an essay that I had written long ago about an incident in the prison visitation room. It speaks to me today, and I wanted to share it with you. Don't do this, don't do that. Dress a certain way, act a certain way. However, in the midst of all of this, a free spirit was on the loose. A young boy, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, decided to have fun with the dominoes his dad was trying to put into a container. He picked up handfuls of them and gleefully began throwing them in the air. The more adults tried to gather up the dominoes and get him to stop, the more fun he had. I just have to tell you, if you've ever been to the visitation center in the Perryville prison, it is not a fun place. And so he wrote some more. As I watched this, I thought of some things I'd like to say to the little fellow. Keep laughing and giggling when you're surprised and delighted. It offers our ears the music of grace. Remain excited at the discovery of dominoes. It tells us there is significance in small things when our eyes have gotten too focused on the big things. Play with other children on playgrounds. It shows us that all people of all backgrounds can meet each other with open arms. Keep talking to the dogs and cats and pigeons and ducks. It reminds us that the Spirit is present in all living things. You have the gift of innocence. You have the gift of dreams. When we see you laughing and playing, our spirits take wing. When we lift you and hold you, we are consecrating a world of hope. You are hope when our hope has dimmed. You are joy when our hearts are heavy. In you, we see the world as we dream it could be. For you remind us what it is to be alive. Isn't that great? What a fabulous writer he is. So my talk title today is Live, Love, and Let Go. And I got this title from a quote that Becky and I read this week by Jack Kornfield. And so here is the whole quote. In the end, just 3 things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. And so the book in our book group, as Ellie mentioned, has been written by Dennis Merritt Jones. And this week I was reading a different book by Dennis, and he talks about a lady who came to him for counseling, who said that she's had a problem that has dominated her life for the last 7 years. And she said, I feel stuck. I don't know which way to turn. And Dennis said to her, give it up. And he said, I don't mean quit. Give it up to a higher power, where all of the wisdom, where all of the intelligence, and where all of the power of the divine infinite spirit resides. And he said, you know, Einstein said that you can't solve a problem at the same level that it was created. You have to move up. And that's kind of what Dennis was telling this woman. And he said, you know, it's not a defeat. It's a surrendering. It's rising above the problem. And it isn't desperation. He said what it is, it's asking spirit to listen to us, to communicate with us, to commune with us. And he said what that takes is going into the silence. And he said it's really not always so easy when you're hurting. He said, but all we need to do is be still and to simply ask God, show me the way. show me the way, and then let go. So I was looking over one of our other books that we read a few years ago. Actually, it was a book before this, I guess, in the book group by Alan Cohn called Dare to Be Yourself. And in there, he said, you know, so often we struggle. I want to talk about letting go, by the way. We struggle to keep things the way we think they should be. And he even talks about a woman in one of his workshops who said, whenever I let go of something, it has scratch marks on it. You know, my nails, I dig in. And he said, you know, we hold on in painful resistance. And when we can move past that, we can see that there was a deeper meaning in what was happening, what was going on in our life, but we couldn't see it when we were looking through the eyes of fear. And he talks about a motion picture called Mission. I don't remember if it was Mission or The Mission. Anybody? Nobody knows about it. Must have been a big hit. Anyway, he said in this movie, the central character is a person who is filled with guilt and remorse because years ago he had killed somebody, and he also engaged in slave trading, and he was just racked by this. He wanted to atone. So what he did, he got a sack and he filled it with all kinds of heavy weaponry, and he put the sack on his back, and he decided to climb a mountain that was right next to a waterfall. And so here he is, he's climbing and climbing, and it gets so difficult, and he's sweating, but he's willing to do it because he believes that with every step, he's paying off his debt. And he finally gets to the top of the mountain, and waiting at the top of the mountain is a group of ferocious-looking Indians. And he knows right away that this is a tribe that he has kidnapped members from and sent into slavery. And the chief, looking at him, recognizes him right away too. And the chief has a long, sharp knife, and he walks over to this fellow, who then gets down on his knees expecting to die. And the chief raises the knife over his head and brings it right down on the bag that the fellow is carrying. And they both watch everything that was inside fly down the mountain, and our man is free. And Alan Cohn says we often live with self-inflicted penance. And he said we think that pain is going to set us free, but what pain does is give you more pain. And so we so often blame God for being a cruel God for letting this happen, when in reality, it's our mind that keeps us chained to wherever we are. And what we need to do is to let go. And he said, you know, we can't change the past, but we can change how we look at it. We can't change the past, but we can change how we look at it. So when I do personal reading, I tend to read present day authors, frankly, more than I read, of course I read Ernest Holmes, but some of the other writers that wrote, I find their writing difficult. I know Petal is going like her mouth is wide open because she loves them. So if we ever teach that Roots class, you can teach it here because I don't like reading them. But so I tend to read more modern people because for me it's more difficult to get through it. But this week I picked up a book that's titled The Game of Life and How to Live It. And it's written by a lady named Florence Scovel Shinn. And I was just really curious. It's a book that we have, and I've gone through it before. And I was curious when it was written, and the copyright on our copy is 1925. And as I was going through it, I thought to myself, this woman's really got stuff that's relevant for today. And so in the chapter that I really focused on, she says, each of us within us have a perfect self-expression, a place that we can fill, and only we can fill it. Nobody else can fill it for us. She said, it's a perfect idea in the divine mind. And then she said, this is what we should demand of Spirit every day. She didn't say this is what we should ask. She said, this is what we should demand of Spirit every day. Say this: Infinite Spirit, open the way for the divine design of my way to manifest. Let the genius within me now be released. Let me see clearly the perfect plan. And then she said, and this kind of shows a little bit how it's dated, she said, and whatever is perfect within us is seeking us. And she gave a couple of examples. She said, like the telephone was seeking Alexander Graham Bell. And she said, and we never know how it's going to show up in our life. Fulton was looking at tea boil in a tea kettle, and out of that was born the steam engine. So then she talked about Gandhi a little, and I want to broaden it. There are some stories about Gandhi in a train. And I don't know if I'm going to tell you two of them, if they happened at the same time or different times. But one of the stories is Gandhi, I'm going to combine them. Gandhi was getting on a train one day, and one of his shoes fell off and went back down on the platform. And he couldn't go down and get it. So what he did was he took off the other shoe and threw it alongside the first one, so whoever found it would have a pair of shoes. And again, I don't know if this happened on the same train ride, but as the train was pulling out, a young reporter started running alongside the train, and he called to Gandhi, and he said, Mr. Gandhi, what's your message to the Indian people? And Gandhi replied back, my life is my message. And that's true for all of us. Our message, our life is our message. And it gets there through our words, through our attitudes, for our beliefs, for our actions. Every day we enforce that message on a daily basis. And when I was thinking about this, it made me think about a time when I was in the school of ministry, when my message got a little messed up and needed to get fixed. So when you're in the school of ministry, most of us will do anything to get a speaking engagement, travel far and wide. And so this particular church asked me to speak, and they were about 100 miles away. And so Becky and I drove, and when we got there, the people, I want to make this clear, the people were really nice, and we really liked them, but it was a way older church. They would make us look like the kindergarten kids. And when we walked in, you could feel the energy was way down. And so we chatted with all of the people, and they were really nice. And then I got up to give my talk, and I could look out and see this group of sweet, but really not energetic people, and it took me right down. And I could feel myself, I could feel as I was starting to talk, like there was nothing in me coming out, because I was following them. And then you know how you can have two thoughts in your mind at the same time. As I was speaking, the thought hit me, they didn't come here to bring you down, they came here for you to bring them up. And that thought hit me, and it changed. I started to really put myself into the talk. And I could see I was waking them up. And at the end, I actually got a standing ovation. And when we were driving home, Becky and I talked about it a little bit, and I don't know if you remember this, but she actually said to me, when I told her what I just told you, she said, I didn't know what it was, but I saw the moment that the light went on in you, that you switched. And when we got home, after we were kind of relaxing, our phone rang, and it was one of our best friends, who still is one of our best friends. And she said, boy, I heard you did a good job today. And I said, how do you know? She said, my mother goes to that church. And she said, my mother called me today, and she said, I've been going to Science of Mind churches 40 years, and I heard the best talk I've ever heard today. And that's kind of the message I wanted to give. It's our how we behave is the message of our life. You know, I could have stayed there and done a lousy talk. They still would have paid me, you know, and nobody would have benefited. But when we're willing to move beyond and to be bigger and to change our beliefs, our attitudes, and our actions, we affect people, and that's what people see. So I want to talk for a while about Wayne Muller. I want to talk about him a little bit, actually twice in the message today. And in one of his books, he writes about love. And think about this now. He said that attention is the tangible measure of love. He said, we allow what we love to become our center. We allow what we love to become our center. So ask yourself this: what's the center of your life? Where do you spend your time and attention? What receives your care and attention? And by definition, that's what you love. So I saw two people look at one another lovingly. The other night, we were watching Dateline, and they were, a woman was murdered, and they were talking about her and her boyfriend, and how much they loved one another, and how much they spent all of their spare time with one another, and doing this and doing that. And as they was describing it, Becky turned to me and said exactly what I was thinking. She said, that's us. That's us. Who we give our time and attention to is what we love. So think about this. If you had to dream, if you sat down to dream about the most beautiful, perfect day you could have, what are you doing, and who are you doing it with? No YouTube there. I think it's beautiful. So I want to talk about another book. I want to talk about two more books here, and they're two of the best books that I have ever read. In fact, the first book is by Wayne Muller, and I remember right after I read it, I was out with a really learned friend, and we were having a drink together, and he said, read any good books lately? And I said, I just read the best book I've ever read. And he said, come on, you can't say that about one book. And I said, well, it's the last one I read, but it's one of the best. And so he went out and got it, and he came back to me and he said, well, I don't know if I would ever say any one book's the best I ever read, but boy, it's in the top 10. And the title of it is, How Shall We Live? How shall we live? And he says, 4 simple questions that reveal the beauty and meaning of our lives. And the 4 questions are, who am I? What do I love? How shall I live knowing I will die? And what is my gift to the family of the earth? So if we look at that first question, who am I? He's saying, the same thing that Florence said, and some of the other people I talk about, that we all have this essential nature that's whole and unbroken. In fact, Ernest Holmes, when he spoke about it, said, you can't do anything that's bad enough to break that divine peace that's within you. No matter what you do, it always remains whole and unbroken. And he said, not only that, you can't get rid of it because you didn't put it there, so you can't get rid of it. So that's that divine peace. And Mother says, so what is it? And how do I find it? And I think that what we teach, we give people tools to be able to decide what it is and how to find it. Tools like prayer, or method of prayer, and meditation, and affirmations, and visioning, so we can get at that. Now his second question is, what do I love? And he said again, whatever we love will shape our days. And then this sounds so poetic to me, he said, how can we plant what we love in the garden of this life? How can we plant what we love in the garden of this life? And then the third question is, how shall I live knowing I will die? And he said, every moment is a gift. It's really interesting. When I did a ton of reading, usually when I get done with doing all the reading, I have 8 or 9 pages, 10 notes. I had 17 pages of notes because I got so into this. And tons of people talk about looking at your death as a way of enhancing your life. And he says every moment is a gift to us. And in our brief time, what qualities do we wish to cultivate? What qualities do we wish to cultivate? And Becky and I were out with a friend yesterday whose wife passed away around a year ago, and we got into all kinds of stuff. We really had a great day. And I was telling them that recently I unfriended a couple of people on Facebook because we were so polarized in our thinking that every day I would get up and read their posts, and of course I would write back. But it was making me angrier and angrier. And as I got angrier, I got meaner. And particularly with one of them who uses really poor grammar and really poor spelling. So I took to correcting his grammar and his spelling. And one day I got up and I thought, is this the person I want to be? Is this really the face that I want to give to the world? And so I unfriended them. And we were talking about it. And yesterday he said, yeah, about one of them, he said, yeah, her post really ticked me off too. And when we went back to his house, he said, I'm unfriending her. And the fourth question is, what is my gift to the family of the earth? And Mother says, we all bring a gift to the table. And the question is, how do we uncover that gift? And it doesn't necessarily, we're not all going to be president, we're not all going to be, whatever. The gift doesn't have to be big. And when I reread this, I thought my father's mother was a good cook, but she was practically blind. And when I would go over, she would always cook something that I loved. And sometimes it was really hard for her. Particularly, she made great hash, and I loved her hash. And I would watch her sometimes preparing it. It was so hard not to be able to see, to cut that. And I mention that because, she's gone, but she sure isn't forgotten. She lives on in my life. And her gift to me was her love. So we all have something that we can give. So the second book that I absolutely read and loved was written by Mitch Albom, and it's called Tuesdays with Maurey. Probably a lot of you have read that or know of it. Mitch Albom is a sports writer in Detroit. Well, now he's written a ton of books. And Maurey was his college professor. And Mitch got in touch, heard that Maurey had Lou Gehrig's disease, and he got in touch with him, and they would spend all day Tuesdays together. And Maurey was giving him lessons on life. And it's kind of like almost a recap of what I've been talking about today. So Maurey told him, the way to get meaning out of your life is to love other people and to devote yourself to your community. He said, devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning in life. And then he said, I love this, he said, love wins. I thought that's a cool sentence, huh? Love wins. And he said the most important thing in life is to learn how to love other people and learn how to let their love come in. And then he talked about change and how we see things. And he said, you know, I can't go shopping now. I can't take the garbage out now. Can't even wipe my own behind now. But he said, I can still see what's important in life. And it's only horrible if you see it as being horrible. And it reminded me of a story of a lady who was a widow and up in her 90s, and she was going to live in a nursing home. And when the attendant took her in the elevator to go up to her room, he described a little bit of it, and she said, oh, I love it, I love it. Oh, it's terrific. And he said, how did you love it when you haven't seen it? And she said, I don't need to see it to love it. All I need to do is to make up my mind that I love it. And that's what Maurey is saying. And then I won't go into it, he talks about death too. And he said, you know, we're all gonna die, but some of us don't believe that. And so we don't live, you know, in that way. And he said, what we need to do is to do what the Buddhists do. He said, have a little bird on our shoulder that asks us every morning, is today the day? Am I ready? Am I doing what I need to do? Am I being the person I want to be? You know, Cornfield said the three most important things that matter: how well have I lived? How well have I loved? How well have I learned to let go? So I'll just close with something from Deepak Chopra, who said, when we know who we really are, in that knowing, we have the ability to fulfill any dream we have, because we are the eternal possibility, the immeasurable potential of all that was, is, and will be. God bless you. Thank you for being here. Have a great day.